This video is just to introduce a few simple formatting concepts in Excel for creating tables with a large amount of text or even just simple tables that are numeric. So to open Excel, you go to the Start menu, which is down here on the bottom left portion of the screen. If you click it, typically the most frequently used programs will get listed in this list of items. Excel usually will show up, and if it doesn't, in this case it's here, but if it wasn't here, I could click all programs, and that would actually list all the programs installed on this machine, and Excel should be in that list of applications. But here it is right here in our regular menu, so I'll click it. And you should, when you open this up, you should get an option to create a new workbook. And so in this case, there's a blank workbook. That's what you should choose. Sometimes there's some templates that you can choose from, but blank workbook is probably the easiest starting point. So here's my spreadsheet. This is called a worksheet. I can have more than one worksheet. This worksheet is called sheet 1. If I click the plus, that will give me another worksheet. I'll just show you that that is now sheet 2. So I can have stuff here. And on sheet 2, I can have stuff here. And they're treated separately. So just something to know. I can right click, basically click on the right button on the mouse, and I can rename that worksheet if I wanted to, or I'm going to delete it in this case, but I can do a few things here, a few simple things. So I'm going to delete it because we actually only need one worksheet. So Excel actually does a really good job with managing formatting. So let's say I want to create some information about the interviews that are being conducted. So I believe we wanted to have some columns set up here. So I'll use B, C, D, E, and F, or maybe 4. I think there was 4 or 5. So I'll just show you with 4. So we'll use these 4 rows, to define the columns that we're going to create, and then on the A column we're going to actually put the list of questions, which I believe there are about 20 questions that we want to put there. So let's just say this is interviewee number 1, and there might be an identifier here, and the second tab is interviewee number 2 with an ID of something, and I can just copy this text here by just I can either hit Command C or I can right click, and right click meaning click the right mouse button, and I have the option to copy, and then I can right click in the target cell that I want to put that text in, and I can just say paste. Now if I paste, I have options here. You typically want to pick values as what you are going to place in there. If you want to keep the formatting and the values, meaning let's say the text was a different color, or it was a different font or a different font size, you could paste it with not only the values that were in that cell, but also the formatting would go along with it. That comes in handy when you're dealing with a table that's already been formatted. You can just have that formatting kind of continue. So I pasted into column D the next interviewee. So now you can see up here there's a bar where I can actually edit the text up here. So you can see when I change the column, the text in this area here actually changes depending on what the cell value is. So for this third one in column D, I don't want interviewee number 2. This is actually interviewee number 3. And so I can just change the text right here in this area. So I'm going to do one more, and I'll copy this cell, and I'll paste it right here. And I'll rename this, or change the values anyway to be different, so that we have 4 unique interviewees. So there's our columns are all set up, and now you notice that these columns won't show the full values of these cells. It won't show all of the text, so you need to get it so that it'll show all the text. There's 2 ways you can do that. You can either spread the cells out so that all the text shows. For example, if I take my mouse, you'll see the cursor changes to an arrow. An arrow, down arrow means select the whole column. So if I click that, it'll select the whole column. But if I actually hover over here and move in between 2 columns, the cursor will change into a bar with arrows facing outward from the bars. And that's essentially tells you that you can move the or change the width of the columns. So if I just click with my index finger or the left mouse button and drag this, you'll see that the column actually resizes. Another thing you can do, if you just want to go and resize all the columns and rows, is you can select using this little triangle here in the corner. If I click that, it selects everything on the worksheet. And then if I make that cursor turn into the line with the 2 outward facing arrows and double click, it actually formats all the selected rows and columns. Likewise, if I do it on a row, it would, if I had something with more text than what is visible vertically, it will actually resize it. And I'll just show you how to do that right now, actually. So let's select some data in cell B1. So we can refer to this as it's row 1, column B, typically we'll just say B1 as the location of this cell. Likewise, this would be C1, and then C2, C3, D1, D2, D3, and so on and so forth. So let's say we have interviewee with this ID. Let's say we don't want the column to be quite as wide as it is. We can select all of this text actually just by clicking the left mouse button. Click once, hold it, and then you can drag to select all 4 columns here. And then there's some options up on the top, and one, if you hover over each of these options, it'll kind of tell you what it does. But there's one here that talks about wrapping text, and that's the one we actually want to choose because we want to have the text, as you can see in this little figure that they put in the help. We want it to go to another line essentially. So I'm going to select that, but you see that nothing happens, and the reason why nothing happens is because the cell widths are wide enough to fit all of the text as they are right now. But if I take one of these cells now and resize it, you'll see that part of this disappears. And the reason why it disappears is because this text in column D1 actually is there. You can see it up on the top here, except that it's not visible because the row was not wide enough. So as you can see, when I actually accidentally did that, but it resized it. But really the way you should be doing it is if you double click, so just like we did with the columns, if I go down to the rows and wait for my cursor to be a bar with outward facing arrows, I can double click and it will resize the row above it to fit all the text. And then it's just a matter of playing around with things. So now let's say I have my questions here. I can do question 1, question 2, and you can see that Microsoft Excel likes to figure out what you're trying to type for you. It's not always right. So I'm just going to do 4 questions here. One thing that's interesting about Excel, I'm pretty sure Excel does this, is if I select all of this and I wait for a crossbars to appear, not this thick cross, but a thin cross, and I go to the bottom right corner, if I left click, hold it, and drag it down, sometimes it knows, yeah, so it knows to actually increment the numbers by 1, just because I had 4 of these selected, so it saw a pattern, and it actually recognized it. So if you are just simply numbering something, it's just kind of a nice little trick. And you can actually get, I believe there was 20 questions we needed, so we could actually do that way. And then if there's actually text that goes along with it, we can say, what is your name? Whoops, we should probably be grammatically correct here. What is your name? Do you fish frequently? In questions like that. So we can have our questions here, and then we can have all our responses here. And the responses may be very detailed. We can actually, just type some text here. A quick brown fox jumped over the moon. Go dogs go. Don't know if you ever read that book, P.D. Eastman. Anyway, go dogs go. So now I have some responses here, and I can actually copy all of this text. Another way to copy is just to select the text up here in this bar and right click copy, and then I'm going to paste the text in this box, in this cell here. Sometimes you have to play around with the cursor because it does get a little confusing, but I'm just pasting the text very quickly into these 4 cells. So it's all the same text, but just to give you an idea of what this would look like. And I'm just going to actually paste this all the way down. Doing that same thing, except there's no pattern, so Excel just essentially just does a copy and a paste of all of this data. And I just want to fill this up with data so that we can format it. So there's 2 ways we can format it. Excel does a great job, as I said, with auto formatting. So if I select all of the area that I want formatted, so in this case I want cells 1 through 21 to deal with all of the rows that I have here of data, and then I want columns A through D to deal with all of the response data. Actually, no, I wanted to go out to E. I'm sorry. So I just extended that a little bit. So now that I have my data selected, I can actually go up here into the top menu bar, and I can do some formatting. So in our case, there is a selection here, format as table. And if I click it, you can see all these different table formats that I can use, just that Microsoft actually just put together for you out of the box kind of thing. So we're going to pick one that sort of resembles how we can best represent this data. And I'm just going to try to pick the simplest one. One thing I like is I do like alternating colors on each line, just because I think it makes it more clear. And when you do that, you actually are asked to define whether your table has headers or not. I'm actually going to say no to this because I believe what Excel is going to try to do is actually sort the data. I mean, you can say it. What it'll do is just format this top bar. Actually, let's just keep it. We'll say yes. In Excel, what it does is when it sees a header, it automatically assumes that you're going to want to sort, be able to sort and things like that. So that's what these arrows are. If I click one of these arrows, you get a bunch of options to sort. And if you have a lot of data, this is actually very useful. I use it all the time, actually. So here is my formatted table, but you can see that all the text is still kind of messed up. So I want all the text in all of these fields, I'm going to select all the fields again. I want all this text to wrap. So I'm going to go back. You can see these tabs up here. These tabs up here reveal different ribbons that you can, full of buttons and tasks that you can do in Excel. So I'm going to the Home tab, and I am going to select that word wrap text. And when I do that, it actually reformatted everything to fit, which is really nice. So now I have this really nice looking spreadsheet. Unfortunately, Excel decided that it was going to basically make everything alternating, but sometimes that happens with Excel. It's just a little tricky sometimes. So I also want to make everything in this column, column A, where my questions are. I want to boldface these, so I can just select the data that I want in bold. Go up here. These are different text formatting options, so I can bold, italicize, underline. I believe there's, yep, double underline. I can put a box around or a border around it. I can draw my own border. I can put different fill. The paint bucket means to fill each cell. So if I chose to fill this with yellow, for example, gives you a little preview. So if I chose yellow or green, I can choose whatever color I want, or I can change the text color. I can change it to, again, any color basically any color under the sun that you want to use. So what I want to do is I just want to make it boldface. And if you want to make the text bar larger or smaller, there's up and down buttons here, which will decrease or increase the font size. So I can just click it a few times, make it really giant, or I can click it back down and make it small again. So I think that's pretty much the basics of setting up an Excel spreadsheet and putting data in and formatting it in a way that makes sense.